Be me, Madison, 34-year-old HR director at massive multinational tech corporation, pulling in $180,000 annually plus bonuses, corner office, company car, the works. Been climbing corporate ladder for years with my progressive leadership approach. Finally in position to make real change and show these men what equality actually looks like. Most satisfying part of my day is watching male employees squirm when I explain their unconscious biases. Sitting in executive meeting last Tuesday, CEO talking about enhancing workplace culture and addressing systemic issues. Perfect opening. I'd like to propose a comprehensive awareness training program targeting the root causes of workplace inequality. Executives nodding along like sheep. This will be a mandatory program designed to address inherent problematic behaviors and mindsets. Spend next 3 weeks crafting the perfect training curriculum, calling it Deconstructing Workplace Privilege, a journey toward authentic allyship. 40 hours of mandatory sessions spread across 2 months. Every single male employee from entry level to senior management required to attend. Women completely exempt because they're already enlightened, obviously. This is about education, not punishment, I keep telling myself. First session rolls around, conference room packed with uncomfortable men. Gentlemen, we're here today because the workplace has been shaped by centuries of male-dominated thinking. Watching them shift in their seats gives me actual dopamine hits. Today, you'll begin examining your role in perpetuating systems that marginalize your female colleagues. Session 1 requires each man to stand up and publicly acknowledge 3 ways they've benefited from male privilege. Watching David from accounting stammer through his confession is absolutely delicious. I guess I've never worried about walking to my car alone at night. Very good, David, recognizing that privilege is the first step toward growth. By week 2, I'm really hitting my stride. Implemented listening circles where men sit silently while I read statistics about workplace inequality. They're not allowed to speak, only reflect and absorb. Had Marcus from IT try to raise his hand with a question. Marcus, this isn't a debate. Your job right now is to listen and learn. The look of frustration on his face is chef's kiss. Week 3 introduces accountability exercises. Each man writes a formal apology letter to their female colleagues for perpetuating harmful masculine norms. Template includes phrases like, I acknowledge my complicity, and I commit to dismantling toxic patterns. Watching 50-year-old VP Richard struggle through writing about his aggressive communication style almost makes me laugh out loud. Some of the men start coming to my office with concerns. Typical fragility response, honestly. James from legal asks if women will have similar training. James, women aren't the problem here. Women don't need to unlearn centuries of oppressive behavior patterns. His face goes red, but he just nods and leaves. They're finally understanding their place in this conversation. By month 2, the complaints are getting more frequent. Men whispering in hallways, looking stressed during sessions. Tyler from marketing mentions feeling singled out during a particularly effective exercise about interrupting behaviors. Tyler, if you're feeling defensive, that's probably your privilege talking. Lean into the discomfort. Resistance means it's working. The empathy immersion sessions are my masterpiece. Men must role-play scenarios where they experience workplace harassment. Watching them struggle with the emotional weight is genuinely educational. Now imagine feeling this way every single day just for existing in your female colleagues' bodies. Several men actually tear up during these sessions. Finally, some authentic emotional growth. Week 6 brings mandatory journaling assignments. Men must document daily instances where they notice their privilege. Submit weekly reflection papers analyzing their problematic thoughts and reactions. Reading these submissions becomes my favorite part of each week. So much raw, honest acknowledgement of their inherent biases. Start getting emails from wives and girlfriends thanking me for opening their partner's eyes. Several women mention their husbands coming home emotionally drained but more aware. This is exactly the cultural shift we needed. Finally addressing the root causes instead of just treating symptoms. Around week 7, some troublemaker named Kevin starts asking about legal implications. Kevin, education isn't discrimination. This is professional development. His questions become increasingly pointed and legalistic. clearly trying to undermine the program with bad faith arguments. Document every interaction in case HR needs to address his disruptive behavior later. Other men start joining Kevin's little resistance movement, asking for documentation and policy justification. Suddenly, everyone's a legal expert when their comfort zone gets challenged. Gentlemen, your resistance to growth is exactly why this program is necessary. Shut down their complaints before they can gain any momentum. Week 8, the CEO asks for a brief update on program effectiveness. Present beautiful slide deck showing engagement metrics and behavioral modification indicators. Men are definitely more aware of their language choices and space-taking behaviors. Exactly the cultural transformation we promised. CEO seems satisfied with the progress reports. Getting called into emergency executive meeting on a Friday afternoon. Weird energy in the room, lots of serious faces. CEO has stack of papers in front of him. Lawyer sitting in corner. Madison, we need to discuss some concerns that have been raised about your training program. Apparently, some of the men got together and hired external counsel, claiming the program constitutes discriminatory treatment based on gender. Completely absurd legal interpretation of basic educational initiatives. This is just standard diversity training adapted for our specific workplace needs. Lawyer starts reading from their complaint. Mentions mandatory attendance based solely on gender. Deliberate exclusion of female employees from required programming. Hostile work environment created through targeted humiliation tactics. Every phrase makes my stomach drop a little lower. Madison, did you require men to write apology letters to female colleagues? That was an accountability exercise designed to foster authentic reflection. Lawyer's eyebrows raise as he makes notes. CEO looking increasingly uncomfortable with each detail. Turns out, Kevin documented everything. Recorded audio from sessions, saved all email communications, compiled testimonies from dozens of male employees about discriminatory treatment, somehow twisted legitimate educational programming into legal grievances. Madison, their attorney is seeking $7 million in damages for gender discrimination. $7 million. For teaching men about their privilege. The audacity is actually breathtaking. Lawyer explains the company's liability exposure, mentions something about Title VII violations and equal treatment standards. Clearly, these men found some ambulance chaser willing to twist civil rights law. This is exactly the kind of resistance successful change initiatives always face. CEO stops me mid-sentence. Madison, effective immediately, the training program is suspended pending legal review. Suspended. After all the progress we've made, after all the consciousness raising and authentic growth. Spend weekend researching the legal claims. Surely there's precedent for gender-specific educational programming. Mandatory training targeting specific demographics happens everywhere. This has to be frivolous litigation designed to intimidate progressive leadership. Monday morning brings meeting with company's general counsel. Apparently, the complaint includes specific examples of humiliating treatment, mentions men being forced to confess privilege in front of groups, describes listening exercises as punitive silence requirements. They're weaponizing the language of education against itself. Madison, did you tell Tyler from marketing that feeling defensive meant his privilege was talking? I was helping him understand his emotional responses within a framework of growth. Lawyer winces and makes more notes. Somehow therapeutic guidance becomes verbal abuse in their narrative. Wednesday brings news that local employment attorneys are reaching out to more male employees. Apparently the story leaked, and now it's becoming a feeding frenzy. Men from other departments coming forward with their own experiences. Suddenly, everyone's a victim of basic educational programming. CEO calls me in Thursday morning, with HR, VP, and legal counsel present. Madison, we've decided to place you on administrative leave while this gets resolved. Administrative leave for implementing approved diversity initiatives. This is temporary until we can assess the full scope of potential liability. Sitting at home for 2 weeks watching the news coverage, local business journal picks up the story. Headline reads, Tech giant faces discrimination lawsuit over male-only training program. Comment sections filled with typical male fragility responses. Finally, someone standing up to reverse discrimination. Company settles the lawsuit for $4.2 million. $4.2 million for teaching basic privilege awareness. Press release includes formal apology for programming that inadvertently created discriminatory workplace conditions. Get termination letter delivered via certified mail. Effective immediately due to policy violations and potential liability exposure. 20 years of HR experience destroyed by fragile masculinity and opportunistic lawyers. Severance package contingent on signing NDA about training methodologies. Trying to find new position proves surprisingly difficult. Every HR director role requires extensive background checks. Somehow this incident follows me to every interview. We see you were involved in some litigation at your previous company. Headhunters stop returning calls after initial conversations. LinkedIn messages about opportunities suddenly dry up. Professional network becomes mysteriously unavailable for coffee meetings. Apparently, being innovative in diversity programming makes you high risk. 6 months later, still unemployed. Savings account draining faster than expected. Had to downsize apartment and sell company car. Watching men celebrate online about justice being served makes me physically ill. Ran into former colleague Emma at coffee shop last week. Madison, I heard what happened. Such a shame because your heart was in the right place. Heart was in the right place, like I was some naive idealist instead of experienced professional. Companies are just so lawsuit scared these days. Started freelance consulting to pay rent, mostly small nonprofits who can't afford real HR directors. Income dropped from 6 figures to barely covering basic expenses. All because I tried to address systemic workplace inequality. The worst part is watching the company hire a new HR director, some middle-aged white guy named Robert, who immediately canceled all diversity initiatives. Back to status quo corporate culture where privilege goes unexamined. Everything I worked toward completely reversed. Former male colleagues posting on social media about workplace improvement. Kevin got promoted to senior manager last month. Tyler from marketing starts posting about fair treatment for everyone. They're acting like heroes for destroying progressive leadership. Therapist says I need to process the professional trauma and rebuild my identity. Professional trauma, like I'm some kind of victim instead of casualty of systemic resistance. Maybe this experience can help you understand different perspectives. 12 months ago, I was making $180,000 implementing cutting-edge diversity programming. Now I'm doing part-time consulting for activist organizations that pay in exposure, all because fragile men couldn't handle examining their privilege. Parents keep asking when I'm getting back into corporate, as if this is temporary setback instead of career destruction. Blacklisted from major companies for being too progressive. Somehow that makes me the problem. The real tragedy is how this will discourage other HR professionals from taking bold action. My sacrifice becomes cautionary tale about going too far with diversity initiatives. Systemic change requires risk-taking, and I became the scapegoat. Probably set back workplace equality efforts by decades. Sometimes wonder if I should have been more gradual in implementation. Maybe started with mixed gender programming before targeting specific demographics. But incremental change never disrupts entrenched power structures. Real transformation requires direct challenge to privilege. Still believe the training content was necessary and effective. Men genuinely became more aware of their unconscious biases. Several participants later admitted the experience was eye-opening. Unfortunately, their lawyers convinced them to reframe education as oppression. Watching other companies implement watered-down diversity training. Surface-level initiatives that avoid challenging anyone's comfort zone. Exactly the kind of performative programming that changes nothing. My approach actually produced measurable behavioral shifts. The lawsuit settlement included mandatory inclusive training design workshops for all HR staff, basically teaching people to avoid my mistakes of targeted programming, turning my innovative methodology into example of what not to do. Professional legacy becomes cautionary tale about excessive progressivism. Started writing anonymous blog about the experience. The price of pushing boundaries. An HR director's story. Maybe other women can learn from my situation, avoid the legal pitfalls while still pursuing meaningful change. Networking events become exercises in damage control. Oh, you're Madison from that training program controversy. Immediately having to defend basic diversity education principles. Professional reputation permanently tied to one bold initiative. Former CEO reached out last month through intermediary. Apparently wants to clear the air and discuss lessons learned. Lessons learned. Like my termination was educational opportunity rather than career assassination. Politely declined through my attorney. The hardest part is explaining gap in employment to potential employers. I was terminated due to litigation surrounding diversity. Programming automatically disqualifies me from any position involving policy development. 20 years of expertise reduced to liability risk. Started taking contract work doing basic HR administration, data entry, and benefits processing for temp agencies, from director-level strategy to clerical work. All because I tried to address workplace inequality directly. Kevin from my former company speaking at HR conferences now. Topic: building inclusive workplaces through collaborative programming. Using my failure as example of divisive approaches that backfire. Somehow became expert on diversity despite opposing every initiative. The men who sued me got promoted and celebrated, positioned as whistleblowers who saved company from discrimination. Their LinkedIn profiles mention advocating for workplace fairness, complete narrative reversal where oppressors become heroes. Former female colleagues maintain careful distance, don't want association with controversial approach to gender equality. Sisterhood evaporates when career advancement is threatened. Solidarity has limits when lawsuits get involved. Therapist suggests reframing the experience as learning opportunity. Learning opportunity. Learned that progressive leadership gets punished by legal system. Learned that challenging male privilege triggers massive backlash. Learned that innovation in diversity work carries career-ending risks. 18 months later, and still fighting to rebuild professional standing. Considering career change entirely since HR doors remain closed. Maybe teaching or nonprofit work where values alignment matters more. Corporate world clearly isn't ready for authentic equality initiatives. The settlement money went to men who claimed emotional distress. Emotional distress from being asked to examine their workplace behavior. Meanwhile, my emotional distress from career destruction gets no consideration. Sometimes see former participants from training program around town. Most avoid eye contact or cross street when they notice me. Few who acknowledge me seem genuinely apologetic about lawsuit. Madison, I hope you know it wasn't personal. Wasn't personal. Just destroyed my livelihood and professional reputation. But sure, nothing personal about organized legal assault on progressive leadership. Their guilt doesn't pay my rent or restore my career. The real victory for them was making me unemployable, sending message to other HR professionals about consequences of bold action. Chilling effect on diversity programming across entire industry. My termination becomes cautionary tale about overreach. Started volunteering with legal aid clinic helping employment discrimination victims. Ironic twist helping people who actually faced workplace discrimination. While my own experience gets dismissed as reverse discrimination, somehow targeting privilege became equivalent to actual oppression. Former colleagues occasionally reach out with opportunities. Entry level, positions at fraction of previous salary. Great chance to rebuild and show you've learned from experience. Learning from experience means accepting diminished career prospects. The men who destroyed my career moved on within months. Promotions, raises, industry recognition for courage. While I remain professionally radioactive 18 months later. Gender truly determines who gets redemption and who gets permanent punishment. Sitting in studio apartment, reviewing bank statements. Calculating how long savings will last at current spending rate. From corner office to cramped apartment because I challenged male comfort zones. This is the price of being unwilling to accept incremental change. Parents finally stopped asking about getting back into corporate. Reality of professional blacklisting finally sinking in. Maybe this is opportunity to pursue your passion projects. Passion doesn't pay student loans or health insurance premiums. The men who sued me probably don't think about impact on my life. Moved on to career advancement while I struggle with basic survival. their brief discomfort during training sessions versus my ongoing unemployment. Proportionality was never a factor in their victimhood narrative. Sometimes wonder what would have happened with different implementation strategy, voluntary participation instead of mandatory attendance, mixed gender groups instead of targeting specific demographics. But compromise never produces transformative change. Watching new generation of HR professionals avoid anything remotely controversial, diversity programming reduced to safe platitudes and surface-level initiatives, my failure becomes reason to avoid challenging systemic inequality, progress delayed indefinitely by legal precedent. The lawsuit settlement included company admission that training violated equal treatment principles. Equal treatment. Like centuries of male workplace dominance, somehow makes gender-specific education discriminatory. Legal system protecting existing power structures under guise of fairness. Former company's stock price actually increased after settling lawsuit. Investors apparently relieved by resolution and return to normal operations. My termination literally added value to shareholder portfolios. Capitalism rewards punishment of progressive leadership. Started seeing therapist who specializes in workplace trauma. Workplace trauma feels accurate description of systematic career destruction. Processing grief over lost professional identity and financial security. Mourning dreams of continuing progressive leadership in corporate environment. The hardest part is losing sense of professional purpose. 20 years building expertise in creating equitable workplaces. Now that expertise marks me as litigation risk instead of valuable asset. Life's work becomes cautionary tale about progressive overreach. Contract positions occasionally available but nothing with real authority. Relegated to administrative tasks, while male colleagues shape policy. From decision maker to data processor because I challenged gender dynamics. Professional exile disguised as fresh start opportunities. Former participants occasionally reach out with private messages. Madison, I wanted you to know the training really did help me understand things differently. Sorry about how everything turned out with the lawsuit. Private appreciation, while public narrative remains my professional destruction. These acknowledgments of program effectiveness make situation more painful. Training achieved intended goals of increasing awareness and modifying behavior. But legal system punished educational success because methods challenged comfort zones. Effectiveness becomes irrelevant when fragility gets weaponized through litigation. New HR director at former company eliminated all mandatory diversity programming. Voluntary attendance only, generic content, no challenging of privilege. Back to ineffective initiatives that changed nothing fundamental. My replacement specifically hired to avoid controversial approaches. Industry publications occasionally reference Madison case as cautionary example. How progressive HR initiatives can backfire through poor implementation. My methodology becomes example of what not to do. Professional legacy reduced to warning about excessive progressivism. The men who sued me positioned as workplace equity advocates, speaking at conferences about inclusive approaches to diversity training, using experience of destroying my career to build their own professional brands. Oppressors become thought leaders on preventing oppression. Financial pressure forced me to consider bankruptcy consultation, from six-figure salary to potential bankruptcy in under 2 years. All because I implemented targeted training to address gender inequality. Professional destruction becomes personal financial catastrophe. Parents suggest moving back home to regroup and recover, admitting defeat and returning to childhood bedroom at age 35. Professional independence destroyed by male fragility and legal opportunism. Complete reversal of adult achievement because I challenged systemic privilege. The settlement agreement included clause preventing me from disparaging company publicly. Can't even tell full story of what happened without violating NDA. Silenced about own professional destruction while opponents freely shape narrative. Legal system protects corporate reputation while destroying individual victims. Former female colleagues avoid association but privately express sympathy. Madison, I admired what you were trying to accomplish. Unfortunately, the execution just wasn't sustainable. Sympathy doesn't restore career or pay living expenses. Sustainable apparently means avoiding anything that challenges male comfort. Sustainable means incremental change that threatens no one. Sustainable means accepting inequality rather than risking backlash. Learned that. Transformation requires sacrifice I wasn't prepared to make. 24 months later, and story occasionally resurfaces in employment law discussions. Landmark case of reverse discrimination in workplace training. My attempt to educate men about privilege becomes precedent for protecting male comfort. Legal victory for maintaining status quo power dynamics. The real tragedy is chilling effect on other HR professionals. Avoiding innovative programming to prevent career-ending lawsuits. Diversity initiatives reduced to safe, ineffective platitudes. Progress delayed indefinitely by fear of legal retaliation. Sitting in studio apartment reviewing job applications for administrative positions. From HR director implementing policy to clerk processing paperwork. Professional trajectory completely reversed because I targeted male privilege directly. This is what happens when women challenge systemic inequality too boldly. Former company's hiring of male HR director sends clear message. Women who push boundaries get terminated and blacklisted. Men who oppose progress get promoted and celebrated. Gender determines who survives challenging workplace power dynamics. The lawsuit victory becomes template for opposing diversity initiatives. Legal precedent that targeting specific demographics constitutes discrimination. My failure enables future challenges to any programming that addresses privilege. Professional destruction serves broader agenda of maintaining inequality. Therapist asks about acceptance and moving forward. Moving forward means accepting diminished career prospects. Acceptance means acknowledging that challenging male privilege carries permanent consequences. Healing requires grieving dreams of continued progressive leadership. 2 years later, an unemployment gap makes finding equivalent position impossible. Professional skills atrophy while male colleagues advance. Career permanently derailed by single initiative that threatened comfort zones. This is the price women pay for being unwilling to accept incremental change. The men who destroyed my career probably sleep peacefully. Brief discomfort during training sessions versus ongoing professional exile. Their emotional distress compensated while my career destruction goes unaddressed. Justice apparently means protecting male comfort at any cost. Former colleagues occasionally mention openings at reduced levels. Great opportunity to get back into the field. Rebuilding from entry level after 20 years of experience. Starting over because I refuse to accept workplace inequality. Parents finally understand this isn't temporary setback. Professional reputation permanently damaged by association with controversial methods. Career recovery requires complete identity transformation. Madison, the progressive HR director, died with that lawsuit.